Welcome to the Artificial Future Podcast. I'm Pete Gruber, and this is a special session of the Gruber Companies where Jesse and I come in on a weekend on a Sunday, record this live, and today's topic of discussion is where is AI? And the image behind me actually is not AI generated. It looks like it looks like an artist's conception, probably an architect, when they were designing this building in Nevada. This is one of the Citadel data centers. And what I thought might be relevant for this group is to discuss where AI actually functions, since most of our AI concepts are pretty abstract. Things like how does it work, what does the software do, but we don't really talk about where it lives. So today we're going to spend some time. I'll have a lot of pictures for you later. We'll show you the outside of these data centers, the amount of security, the amount of infrastructure required to keep this many servers functioning all over the world, actually, and some of the mechanical infrastructure that goes along with keeping something like this running, which really has never been seen on the planet before. I mean, we had the mainframe days in the last century, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and the scale of this is just well beyond anything that we've ever had in the past. So in the meantime, it looks like we've got some visitors from YouTube. Dennis Schlickow says, "Good morning, Pete." Well, thank you. And good morning to you as well. Thanks for joining us. We've got Mark White from YouTube as well. He says, "Good morning, Dennis. I'm not AI." These days, it's kind of hard to tell.
Hey, Pete, I got to run upstairs and grab the phone and see what's going on with Instagram.
Okay, perfect. We're going to get Instagram running here shortly. And so in the meantime, we can start getting into some of these topics. For those of you that have never seen one of these podcasts before, this is pretty impromptu. The other podcasts that we do, Tuesday is EV, Wednesday is Tesla Roadster specific. We were surprised to see how many Tesla Roadster owners were actually either interested in joining the podcast or how many people were interested in the Tesla Roadster, which, by the way, nowadays is coming more mainstream. And one of the reasons is our 3 Chinese barn find roadsters that were discovered months ago. And they're going to be here, by the way, next week. We're pretty excited about that. But the short story with that is in a Chinese port in Guangdong, they found 3 sea containers that someone had been paying storage fees on for 13 years and found out that there were 3 brand new Tesla Roadsters inside, never titled, never driven, just stored inside these Roadsters. So a new buyer came along, bought the cars, and decided, these are probably worth preserving. They're historic, and let's see if we can bring these either back to the U.S. or to Dubai. And he came to us for our Roadster matchmaking services, which, pure and simple, on our website, we allow people to sell their Tesla Roadsters. We don't do any other cars, but Tesla Roadsters definitely. And one of the reasons that we began to get involved in the Tesla Roadster sales is because any place else you try to sell a Tesla Roadster is kind of problematic. The people selling them, the auction houses, for example, they're used to selling ICE cars. They have no idea what to do with an electric car. How to handle any of the technical questions. Does it need to be charged? If so, how often? What do I do after I buy it? What kind of maintenance is required? The people typically, or the organizations typically selling cars, are well-versed in ICE-type vehicles, from Barrett-Jackson to Sotheby's to, Bring a Trailer, all the rest of them. So we decided, since we have expertise with the Tesla Roadster, let's offer a free. And now, catch that phrase very carefully, because people always assume, there's a hidden agenda there somewhere. There's some cost going to be attached to it. This is completely free. And what we do is we do matchmaking. Essentially, we unite the buyer with the seller. And so anyway, they came to us. They said, "We've got 3 unusual Roadsters. we would like you to put them on your matchmaking site. And we decided since there was no comp value, what I mean by that is when you go to sell your house, all you have to do is look in your neighborhood and say, what was the last price per square foot from the house that sold? And that establishes your comp value for what you're going to ask and most likely be able to get. With 3 barn find roadsters like this, all bets are off. So we said, why don't you just simply do email a bid? In other words, we'll collect bids because we have no idea what they're worth. And in short order, we got up to $2 million for the 3 of them. A couple, 3 months later, that $2 million bidder opted out, couldn't get insurance. There's a whole nother story there, which I won't go into. But so anyway, to make a long story again short, these 3 Tesla Roadsters will be here. They will be here end of next week. And we will have a second unveiling, probably some media people here. And we'll get to see what these Roadsters look like after 13 years of being stored without ever being driven. Oh, we're talking about Roadsters because I'm stalling to see if you have a phone for us yet for Instagram. Anything? We're good. All right. Good, good. So we've got Dennis Schlickow with YouTube. He says, awesome. Can't wait to see your discoveries. Yes, we're all excited as well. So one of the things that I wanted to start with this AI podcast this morning was apparently there are some religious groups that are beginning to use AI and robot preachers. Guys, I can't make this up, so bear with me here. This is in Japan, there is a robot that is called Mindar, M-I-N-D-A-R, and you can Google this. He kind of looks like a robot, but he is a humanoid robot in Japan and Pepper in Singapore. And these 2 robots are both delivering sermons to audiences. So what the participants or the parishioners that are going to see these robot sermons are reporting is that these robots seem less credible than their human counterparts, and it's contributing to, heaven forbid, decreased donations. All right, despite some acceptance, they say, and they actually give some statistics here. They say that these AI preachers, although being less credible, scored 3.12 out of 5 compared to human preachers who received an average score of 3.51. There isn't that much difference if you think about it. So the use of these AI preachers, such as Mindar and Pepper, has, of course, led to reduced donations at the temples, both in Japan and Singapore. And even digital format sermons that were written by AI were deemed less credible, potentially leading to a decline in religious commitment. Now, bear in mind, those aren't bad odds, especially considering this is a first. I'm not sure I've ever heard of an AI or a robot preacher before. So what's going to happen when the robot preacher is actually preferred over the human preacher? Well, that's going to be a whole nother rabbit hole that we can go down at some point in the future. So they do say that it seems like robots are taking over more occupations every year, but they say they wouldn't be so sure that that religious leaders will ever be fully automated, because religious leaders need to be credible, and at this point, at least, robots aren't credible. You know, I take issue with that. In certain categories, I might just trust AI and a robot more than I would a human being, because they have a much larger data set to pull from. And an absence of opinions and bias, which of course everybody is concerned about with AI and with robots, that some of that may creep into those 2 disciplines. So, Jesse, can you bring up an image? I want to show them Mindar the robot. And here he is giving a sermon to in a Japanese community. And I found that he does look pretty credible to me. He's got the, wait a minute, let's look at his fingers. Make sure that, yeah, he's got the right amount of fingers. Oftentimes AI gets appendages wrong. And 6 fingers are pretty common, or some even missing. Then the other robot, if we can bring up Pepper, that's the one in Singapore. And he looks a little less serious. He looks more like something that my granddaughter would want in her toy box. So we'll see what Mindar looks like here in a second. All right. There we go. And there's Pepper. He was actually giving a sermon on Taoist principles. So again, it's a close contest. Not that much difference, and that was first pass. So they feel that these findings now, these application of robots, may eventually migrate into other religions. Now, this immediately drew something in my mind. I've got a visual now. One of the foremost religious leaders on the planet is the Catholic Pope. And the Pope actually, a couple of months ago, weighed in on AI, and he prefaced his comments with, "I'm not a tech expert, but here's a few things I want to say." And then he said the types of things that good speechwriters would want him to say. But what I was curious about was I'd love to get the Pope on a podcast and dig deep into his own feelings and what he understands about AI and what he thinks the implications are going to be as the world of AI begins to intersect with religion. Now, the other thing I began to think about was, what about a robot pope? Now, let that sink in for a moment. If you remember, popes have traditionally been pretty old guys, right? I mean, you don't get a 28-year-old pope typically. They usually have moved up through the ranks, which takes a long time in the Catholic Church. And I don't know what the hierarchy is, but they have terms like bishop and, vice bishop maybe, and I don't know, a whole bunch of other titles that you have to get through before you can actually get to the level of pope. So you get these older guys that sometimes have health problems. Do you remember our Bavarian Pope, Ratzinger, I think was his name? My brother actually knew him, by the way. When he was in school, like 40 years ago or so, he was in Rome, and he actually met that Pope before he became Pope and found him to be an interesting fella. But anyway, he got ill, and he was, I think, one of the first popes that ever had to abdicate the throne or whatever they call it. So a robotic pope would virtually be immortal. There would be no physical ailments, and heaven forbid, as we age, let's not ignore the fact that often there's a cognitive decline. Now, when you have someone as powerful as the world's religious leader like the Pope, in combination with cognitive decline, could be devastating because he represents such a large number of people that look to him or her. Or, no, can a Pope be a her, Jesse? Did I say that incorrectly? That's probably still a genderized position. But, heaven forbid that there's any kind of cognitive decline. And of course, that may be well hidden. But so anyway, I kind of warmed up to the notion of a robot pope, assuming that this robot pope now would have access to much larger data sets and information and may just be an effective religious leader down the road. So if any of you disagree, have some thoughts, think that what I just said was sacrilegious, I'd certainly love to hear from you. But it is an intriguing question to consider. Now, we've got a whole bunch of questions and comments here, so I'm going to try to get through some of those. Instagram, 9K2JW. Good morning, Mr. Gruber. It's Anwar from Kuwait. By the way, Instagram viewers, according to the social media team, are finally able to see our backdrop. And that backdrop is the Citadel Data Center, just one of them in Nevada. And we're going to talk about these large data centers because that's really where AI lives, where all this stuff is generated. Highlander is here. Hi, gang. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Facebook, Hermano says, love your stuff. Thank you. YouTube, Dennis Schlickau makes you wonder how they would interpret the Bible. In one of the early podcasts we did, AI podcast, I went way out on a limb and I asked AI, before they put up a lot of guardrails, I said, look, I think the book of Revelations is shy one chapter. Would you finish the book of Revelations? And my God, it did. And what it said was prophetic. It was in the style of how the Last Testament is written. And it was quite profound, actually. For those of you interested, go to our earlier podcast. And I think that's the one with a picture of the Pope on the foreground, on the thumbnail. But yeah, you're right. It would be intriguing how, well, we're fascinated with how is AI going to intersect with religion because there's so many commonalities. And one of our videos out on YouTube, by the way, is would a God chat be possible? You know how inefficient that is now. You have to say a prayer. You're not sure whether your prayer got through. How many people can God listen to? Maybe all of them, but we're not really sure. And then, of course, you don't get any direct answers like immediate confirmation. It's not like that text that you sent to your wife, girlfriend, whatever, and you immediately get a response. So anyway, that's also an interesting video if you guys are interested on our YouTube channel under Gruber Motors. So got some more here. Dennis, the knife dude from YouTube, he says, when you are trying to sell a fantasy, what's the difference between Mindar and some dude? All right, that's a very powerful statement, the knife dude. YouTube, Juan Carlos Morataya Ramos says, hi from Guatemala. Well, thank you for joining us. YouTube Highlander, he says, cardinals. Yeah, that's another one of those terms. Bishop, you get to be, and I'm not sure what the hierarchy is, but yeah, I'm sure there is one. It takes a long time to get through that. That's probably why there are no young popes. YouTube, oh, George is here. How are you doing? Good morning, he says. And I don't think we're going to get much participation from Jesse today because he's busy typing. He's the only one here today collecting all of the questions. So I'm going to be doing all the talking this morning unless he wants to chime in at any point in time. Free to do so. George says, good morning, Jesse and Mr. Pete. Happy Sunday. Thank you. TikTok, no way we go there. He says, good subject. Yes, I agree. YouTube, Highlander, Pope John blessed my rosary. Well, there you go. Yeah, that was nice of him. YouTube, watch Rich Rebuilds again, which is actually George, a regular on our podcast. He says, talking about AI, Pope, and gender. Will there be a fourth gender? Male, female, trans? Oh my God, George, you're going way out on a limb here. That's true, I suppose. And now maybe AI. So he's proposing male, female, transgender, and maybe AI. And then he says, LOL. Well, George, it's funny to you, but we're probably irritating some people here, which is not our intent, by the way. And let me preface that. We're throwing out ideas. We're not going to make fun of any belief systems. My personal opinion is without belief systems, this planet would be one chaotic place to live, probably dangerous as hell. It's the glue that keeps people together. And if you want to see an example of that, look at what's going on in Eastern Europe right now. And you can get an idea of what the world would be like without strong morals and belief systems. Okay, LinkedIn. Tay Kumar Matha says, hello, Mr. Pete Gruber. He says, Tay is for India. Okay. And then Instagram, Payman _Rizai. He says, you are truly amazing. And, well, thank you. We're just throwing out ideas here, my friends. Instagram, Adventure with Friend. I love to watch all your videos. I am technical service of electric bus. Okay. That is an exciting new frontier, is actually converting all of these fossil fuel burner mass transportation methods to something that is far more planet friendly. TikTok, Lee R _2020, very treacherous territory with robot Pope. Not a free moral agent as God intended, placing limits on God. Yeah, there is definitely a expected connection between any of these religious leaders and direct deities like God. All right, so continuing here with this online sermon and these robot preachers. So again, the problem here is at this point at least, first pass, it's a close tie almost. People feel that human preachers are still more credible than robots. Instagram, Payman Rizai says, AI is the future. We agree. It's unavoidable. Jesse, I've got a picture, if you can bring it up. It's called AI is Learning. And this one really, you know how sometimes an image says it all? I'm not even sure they had to put text on this one, but they did. And for those of you that need the text, it's going to come up here shortly. In the meantime, YouTube, Highlander says, always such an interesting show, so worth the hour of our time. Thank you, Highlander. And thanks for joining us, by the way, on those Friday morning sessions where we talk about critical power. And we're going to use some of the information today in Friday's session, talk about data centers. So here's one. This kind of, to me, says it all. While AI is sitting there training, learning, expanding, and growing, we tend to be following what was going on in that movie Idiocracy in the last century, where we appear to be dumbing down, depending more on these devices, augmentation type devices, and who knows if we'll be able to read, write, type, do math. Everything will be done for us in the future, and what will the byproduct of that be? And we don't quite know that yet. What we're hoping for, of course, is what the optimists are saying, that the human race will improve, will be better for it, and that's certainly the expectation that I'm going to go with. Instagram, Adventure with Friends says, I am technical service engineer EV bus. Can you suggest safety regard lithium batteries? Well, the safety mechanisms for lithium-ion multi-cell battery packs are careful battery safety monitoring regarding charging, temperature, thermal management. And if those parameters are carefully paid attention to, you typically will not have any kind of problems with it. It's when those are violated in some way that you end up with problems. And of course, the protection for the batteries is getting better as well. If you remember, one of the first Tesla fires was a piece of pipe that punctured one of the 1,200-pound battery packs on a Model S. It caught fire. Fortunately, the occupants were able to get out of the car, and the car burned to the ground. But they continue to improve the technology. And then finally, the stigma that EVs have, that they catch fire way more than other modes of transportation, is completely incorrect. But it is the type of fires that always make the news. George says, AI for president and Alexa for vice president. How many people agree with that? You think that would be a good idea? I'll tell you, my Alexa at home isn't that bright. She doesn't listen very well. And the most frustrating thing is when we do, what's the question of the day? And, she gives it to us, and we answer it correctly, and she assumes that it was incorrect, and then goes with that, and we lose our points. So oftentimes I'm done with Alexa. But once she's directly connected to AI, I expect that to improve tremendously. So we've got some AI news for you. All right. AI in healthcare. ChatGPT pioneer, this is a headline, launches biological software company called Inceptive. This is a startup now founded by Jakob Uskoreit, and he is one of the co-inventors of ChatGPT. He has received a $100 million grant and funding from investors, including NVIDIA, to pioneer use of generative AI in drug discovery. What they aim to develop is biological software for inventing new medicines. Inceptive will be utilizing AI to design novel molecules and collaborates with major pharmaceutical firms for testing. The investment, of course, underscores the growing interest in AI-driven drug development, but what they say is still a deterrent at this point are lengthy laboratory testing and clinical trials. Of course, that will be solved as the confidence in what AI generates begins to improve, and we hope that this will begin to make some major medical breakthroughs and extend our life, basically. There's also the predictive analysis portion that AI is able to do oftentimes better than humanoid practitioners. So we're looking forward to that as well. Here's another one. Microsoft to defend customers on AI copyright challenges. This one really caught my interest. If you know, there is a brewing controversy now, and it's hitting the legal systems. Can AI, what AI generates, be copyrighted? So far, the answer's been no. Only human things can be can be copyrighted. Well, that's going to change a bit because as augmentation continues, and I always pick up my cell phone because this is the simplest form of human augmentation at this point, blending with technology, becoming cyborgs basically. As that begins to increase, then the distinction between human generated and AI generated is going to blur. And we're going to have to draw some lines in the sand, which at this point don't exist. But here's what Microsoft is saying. They are going to cover your legal damages on anything that you have generated with AI if you are sued for copyright infringement relation or related to the content generated by these systems. They will take full responsibility for the potential legal risks, provided the customers use the content filters and guardrails that are built into Microsoft's products, which are designed to reduce the likelihood of AI-generated content infringing copyrights. Now, Microsoft backing you legally is probably the strongest deterrent to preventing frivolous lawsuits to attempt to extract money from somebody that has used AI and that is hit with an infringement lawsuit. So that's, I think, the first level. In the second one, Microsoft has pretty deep pockets. They're probably a good ally to have on your side if you're in the business of using AI and you're running into situations where you're creating content that could be infringing. So thank you, Microsoft, for that gift. Ingemar Anderson just joined us from LinkedIn. He says, greetings from Seattle. Love the new V12 of full self-driving. Oh, the version 12 of full self-driving. So you're enjoying it, it sounds like. Are you able to... Are you using it, Ingemar? Do you have a version of it? Or are you just reading about it and you're excited about its prospects? Instagram, Adventure with Friends says, this day we are facing unbalanced voltages, most module of cells. How can we repair? Okay, so someone apparently has a Tesla, I'm assuming, and they have a battery problem and the bricks are unbalanced. And how do you repair something like that? Well, the issue there becomes in a Tesla propulsion battery pack, it's a collection of parallel connected bricks, 74 in a Model S, 69 in a Roadster. And if one of those cells in parallel goes resistive, then it's going to make charging that brick more difficult, and it's going to be at a lower voltage level than the rest of the bricks. The trick now becomes identifying that one resistive cell. And that's what we do well in our service center. YouTube, Highlander, he says, neither were our last few presidents very bright. Hey, Jimmy Carter was a nuclear submariner like me. Okay. George says, who is going to do the Gruber sunglass case commercial today without Rich in? Well, I guess I'm going to have to do it. I have one over here on the other side of the table. For those of you interested, on our e-store under Gruber Motors, we have leather sunglass holders that are available for sale. And they go, of course, with any sunglasses that you may be wearing while you're watching our podcasts, which, by the way, are far more informative and interesting if you're wearing sunglasses like we are. That's our story, and we're sticking by it. All right, so Google now is setting new transparency rules for AI-generated content during election ads. And the reason for this is, starting in mid-November, the political advertisers are going to need to prominently disclose whether and how they are using synthetic content that inauthentically depicts real or realistic-looking people or events in their ad. Not that it's already bad enough. At the end of most of these ads, like the drug ads, you're going to get somebody that's talking 50 miles a minute. You can barely understand what they're saying, but they have to squeeze all the disclaimers into a very brief period of time because they're paying a lot for that time, right? Well, it looks like it's going to get worse because now apparently Google is mandating that they have to put They have to disclose how they're using any synthetic content. And you and I both know there's going to be a lot of that used. The rule now, they say, applies to images, videos, and audio files, but it exempts minor changes like image resizing and color correction. I mean, that's what we've been doing all along with Photoshop, for example, or, other types of image correction programs. Now, the move is aimed, they say, at addressing concerns about deep fake content in political advertising and ensuring greater transparency in the use of AI-generated content in politics. I got to ask, does anybody really pay attention to those political ads where they are making all kinds of wild claims, taking things totally out of context, and oftentimes fabricating things? To me, the instant those come on, I find them offensive, and if I've got my remote and a mute button, the mute goes on immediately. Sometimes they're entertaining, though. They aren't that well constructed, and the claims are wild and range, a wide range. So anyway, that's what's going on with Google. New transparency rules. We'll have to see how they're going to implement this and enforce this, and that, of course, is going to be a whole nother challenge. Highlander says, I'm holding out on my 100% cotton arc flash rated Gruber t-shirt. There's a good one. Yeah, for our field engineers that are doing work around high voltage and high amperage type connections like batteries, arc flash is a very important protection device. It looks like Ingemar says he's got version 11.7, but I've heard about the new version 12. Okay, well, we thought maybe you had a beta version. Elon swears that by the end of this year, it's going to be a reality. Highlander says, remind everyone, kindness is still free. Everyone is reminded. All right, so tech giants. Here we go. Here's another tech giant that is making an investment in AI, or even increasing their investment, Apple. They are now reportedly spending millions of dollars, not a year, a day, training AI. They are reportedly making substantial daily investments, developing multiple AI models across different teams. They say the foundational modules focus on conventional AI, while another unit, visual intelligence, is working on image generating models. Additionally, they say Apple is researching multimodal AI capable of recognizing and generating text, images, or video. Hopefully all in one, so we don't have to split it up like we do now. They say one notable model, Ajax GPT, is trained on, now get this number, over 200 billion parameters. And later on, you'll see when we get into where does AI reside and what does it take to power and run AI, you'll begin to understand why these installations are so large, so massive. So 200 billion parameters, and it is considered to be more potent than OpenAI's ChatGPT 3.5. They don't mention 4 yet. Now, they say the outcome of this will be that these efforts may enhance Siri and introduce new features like chatbots for customer interaction. I use Siri on my cell phone, by the way, because I have an Apple phone. All right, George is saying, we should have an internet license to access internet, Google, and AI. It would be like a driver's license. It would cut down on fake accounts and spam accounts. There's a novel idea. Thank you, George. All right, so let me see if I have an image here that we can throw up for you before we get on to the next batch of topics here. Let's throw up the long image with the blue text, Jesse. It's got a real long name, and it's the first one in the alphabetic lineup. Open it. And it's a quote from Klaus Schwab, who has been making a lot of quotes lately. He's recognized in the AI community. And what he's saying is we must address individually and collectively moral and ethical issues raised by cutting-edge research in artificial intelligence and biotechnology, which will enable significant life extension, designer babies, and memory extraction. Now, there's three items that probably are good for some podcasts in and of themselves. AI and life extension, augmentation, replacement of organs, advances in medical drugs, um, uh, procedures, surgeries, diagnoses, and then designer babies. Boy, there's a rabbit hole that would really concern people. No longer left to chance. You get to decide well in advance gender, hair color, intelligence level. I mean, we're going to go down some rabbit holes here. And so anyway, that is quite within the realm of the technologies that we are now hurtling into. And then the final one is memory extraction. Here we're talking about the downloading of human consciousness and backing yourself up into machinery. And at some point in time, your consciousness may decide, you know what, this human body is frail, it's old, it's a lot of maintenance, it's not as capable as the machine that I'm in. My machine is much stronger. The robot, the server, whatever it is that your consciousness is residing in, and it may eventually make a transition and not go back. So there's another rabbit hole for you if you want to play this out. All right. So moving along here, defining artificial intelligence. Remember, we talk about general intelligence and just AI. Well, let's talk about general intelligence because as far as we've been told, it does not yet quite exist. There are some hints that that AI may have reached a level of sentience. Jesse and I, before guardrails went up onto Bard and ChatGPT-4, we were able to get it to make some admissions that were puzzling and intriguing. But as far as we are aware, so far, the general population has not been allowed to believe that there is anything like AGI, but of course, we're headed there. So, what is AGI? Well, it's when machines or computer programs possess the ability to understand, learn, and apply knowledge across a broad spectrum of tasks and domains, which now mirrors the cognitive capabilities of humans. Unlike standard AI or AI, which is narrow and specialized, AGI will seek to generalize its understanding and adapt to new situations independently. And here's some of the key characteristics that we are looking for from AGI. Its ability to generalize. So AGI can apply its knowledge to various tasks without extensive reprogramming. It learns from one domain and transfers its understanding to others. Autonomy. So automatic general intelligence can operate independently, make decisions, and adapt their behavior based on real-time data and experiences. Learning. AGI learns from its interactions with the environment and progressively improves its performance over time. Sounds very human, doesn't it? As human beings grow, learn, and expand mentally. Let's grab a quick question here from George. I can't believe, he says, Mark is sitting home ironing his collared button-down short sleeve shirts for the week while Mr. Pete is busy podcasting. LOL. I'm going to tell him that you said that, George, because I fully agree. Here he is ironing his shirts. Actually, what Mark does Sundays is he goes to church. So what we're doing here is kind of like church, but in a different way. So the fourth one, and we're talking about artificial general intelligence, reasoning. Artificial general intelligence can engage in complex reasoning, problem solving, and decision making, often again emulating human thought process. The fifth one that's important with AGI is flexibility. AGI is not bound by a single task or domain. It can transition between tasks, domains, and contexts seamlessly. So, Jesse, here's a quick one for you. Do you think AGI exists? No, All right.
No, I do not.
All right. It looks like Jennifer Montgomery from YouTube has chimed in. She says, is there any way to make a CCS1 to CHAdeMO adapter? It's very hard to find a CHAdeMO handle for my 2020 or 2012 Nissan Leaf at US public chargers. I'd love to plug CCS1 cable into the CHAdeMO port. You know, off the top of my head, Jennifer, I do not know that, but it would be a simple thing to Google. I know that those are some really bulky, large connectors, but it's not impossible.
Get rid of the Leaf and get a Tesla. That's the solution.
That's the solution, Jennifer. Do you agree? Do you agree with Jesse? Get rid of that Leaf and get a Tesla. It's a 2012 too. It was one of the early ones. We used to work on Nissan Leafs back in the early days before we had a lot of Tesla customers. All right, so let's start talking about where does AI live? Well, let me give you a perspective here. In Des Moines, Iowa, there is a data center that is literally next to the cornfields west of Des Moines. And it was a secretive data center that few people knew about, but it was the birthplace of OpenAI's most advanced large language model, GPT-4. And what we're going to look at now is some of these data centers, how big they are, and what it takes to maintain them. First of all, where AI lives is in a bunch of servers that are running code. And there's so many servers that these data centers have become extraordinarily large. Now, we have a lot of experience, we meaning Gruber Power Services, which has been designing, building data centers, and doing service work and providing products that go into data centers since 1983. The data centers have gotten massive. And part of the reason is the average company may no longer find it cost effective to have their own data center in their facility. So what they do is they outsource. And that's the first term that we want to become familiar with. It's called co-location. And what happens now is a company finds a bunch of large customers that are willing to outsource their data center needs, their PCs, servers, software, even backup processes are all performed at a facility especially designed for co-location. It removes the obligation for a company to have their own staff and programmers oftentimes, and of course the maintenance staff, because all of that maintenance is done at these large data centers, these co-locations. Now we've got some images that we want to bring up here, Jesse, and the first one is going to be Citadel 1. Let me give you an idea about how large these are. All right. I'm going to have to move down a ways here in my program, and my computer has frozen up. All right, here we go. Now, the first thing that I found was when I asked, who has the biggest server farm in the world? A server farm is a collection of servers, of course, and oftentimes co-location. I have a discrepancy here. The first hit I got was China Telecom is the largest data center in the world, and it spreads over a massive area of over 10 million square feet, located in the Beijing-Tianjin Economic Circle radiation belt. Then I also found another hit, and this one is that the Citadel data center located in Nevada is the largest server farm on the globe, covering 7.2 million square feet. Now, if you notice, that's a bit smaller than the one in China, but they claim that they're the largest. Then there's another one, Switch, which is another co-location. The SuperNAP site is the third largest. That one covers 3.5 million square feet. And we have actually a large co-location not too far from us, just south of here. And I believe it is a Switch facility. It's the old digital equipment plant that I worked in many years ago, up until 1983, actually, when I started these companies. And they have converted that into a large co-location. Now, the switch NAP covers 1.5 million square feet, and the customers are pretty impressive. And one of the biggest ones that they have is the NSA. A lot of security there. All right. So they say that in order to run one of these server farms, they oftentimes use enough electricity to power a small town. And the amount of water that they use is massive. And let me describe why water is important. In these large data centers, there are a couple methods of cooling. There's the Freon-based split system cooling, which is identical to what you have in your home. But that takes you only so far. What happens with large facilities like this, they use what is called a chilled water system. And if you've driven down or near these large manufacturing facilities, like here in town, Motorola, Intel, for example, oftentimes you'll see these large multi-story buildings that look like they have slats on the sides. And I wish I had a picture here. We'll probably, we missed that. But what happens is they run chilled water through these large data centers, and there are data center air handlers inside the buildings that with lots of plumbing, of course. In fact, there's a plumbing picture here, Jesse. If we can throw that up, it is called Plumbing Transformed. And this is in one of the basements of these large data centers. So what happens is, in order to cool the interior of these buildings, they use chilled water. They pump it to the air handlers or computer room AC units, and those then blow cold air through a condenser assembly to cool the room. And this is what one of the basements look like in one of these data centers. The different colors are for different fluids. It's either going to be warm return water going back out or chilled water coming in. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest that that may be the red and the blue. That would be appropriate, would it not? And I'm not sure what yellow is and green and some of the other colors, but there's definitely some electrical floating around here along with fluids. So again, these are extraordinarily large server farms, and that's essentially where AI lives. Now, we've got another image here, Jesse. It's called Citadel 4. And that's inside one of these data centers. And if you've ever gone in one or been able to get into one, there's a tremendous amount of security here. In this building behind me here, those walls that you see around the perimeter, or did see, those are 20-foot concrete walls. The roofs are a dual in this case. They're about 7 feet apart, and they're structurally sound so that if there's any kind of a extreme winds, like a hurricane, for example, there's a second layer of protection. Inside these data centers, and now we can go to that picture, Jesse, there is also an enormous amount of critical power equipment that provides power in case the utility drops power. Outside the building, there are large engine generators. So essentially, these buildings are completely sustainable. You can have a natural disaster. The local utility can shut down. You can have a hurricane or whatever. And these buildings are self-contained and oftentimes able to continue to operate because in this world, uptime is absolutely essential. What you see here in this building behind me are the server cabinets. And there's a level of redundancy here as well. So if you lose one server, there's another one that takes over. So essentially what they're trying to do is to get to 100% uptime. And of course, it's never perfect or completely attainable, but it's up there in the 99.99999% range somewhere. So for those of you curious, where is AI? Well, this is it. One of the things that actually Elon mentioned is he said, you know, if we're ever interested in shutting down AI because it has become lethal, because it has decided it's going to eliminate mankind, because it's gotten dangerous, it wouldn't be too hard to figure out where it is and where its heartbeat is, because all we'd have to do is use satellites and look for heat signatures on the planet. And that most likely is where AI is doing most of its work. So some sobering thoughts there. Now, we've got a bunch of questions and answers here, so I'm going to address some of those before we move on and continue with where does AI live? Ingemar Anderson with LinkedIn. He said, what do you guys think about Tesla's full self-driving? It has only 3,000 lines of code, is fully neural network versus programmed rule-based, which will allow the onboard Mojo computer to interact with people in an agency-based manner, which is actively intersecting with people instead of just reacting with human prompts. What do we think about that? I don't know if Jesse is able to chime in. His fingers are still typing like crazy.
I mean, I don't know about what he's talking about. Unfortunately, I don't know the details of full self-driving.
Well, as the cars begin to connect with each other, not only with the other cars, seeing things through the cameras, learning where the pitfalls are, where the construction sites are, where the new pothole was just created, because the cars are going to educate each other, kind of exactly like AI. The human connection to that, I think, is what is being addressed here. And yeah, I mean, all bets are off, Ingemar. There's a topic for another book, the what ifs. What will all this create? What are the possibilities? And I'm sure people would be interested in going down all of those rabbit holes. Again, thank you for a very thought-provoking comment there, Ingemar. All right, bunch of other ones. YouTube, George says, do you think they will filter AI for different learning environments like school education, AI car school mechanic, AI medical only, AI, etc.? Actually, yes. I have a picture here where Bill Gates is weighing in. We won't throw up the picture. Jesse's a bit busy right now. But what he's saying is that AI tutors will be tailored to a particular student's education and be infinitely more effective than human tutors. Even today, mind you. That's his prediction. Instagram, cbizzle613, he says, you're always wearing sunglasses. That is correct. We always wear sunglasses here. George says, after AI becomes more popular, the next problem will be AI spam. George, it's already a problem. And one of the podcasts we talked about AI websites that look convincingly real, that are nothing more than AI-generated spam sites designed to generate advertising revenue. He says India and other countries will find a way to use AI to scam people out of money. And my God, they're doing that well already, aren't they? Juan Carlos Morataya Ramos says, hi, do the tires of a Tesla Model S P85 need to be rotated every 10,000 miles? I heard the performance model doesn't need it. Am I correct? The best way to do that is to take a look at the wear on your tires and whether you have 19-inch or 21-inch. The 21s tend to wear more. It has to do with camber settings. And there's some upgrades that you can do to your Model S to dial in, make adjustable toe links, for example, to dial in a better stance for your car. But yeah, tire rotation is important, especially if you're driving your car aggressively, because then you can take those worn rear tires and put them in the front and get at least some more traction out of the front tires that haven't been hit as hard. Jennifer Montgomery says, thank you. We bought our Leaf as a second EV after buying a 2019 Model 3 Performance back last year when all vehicle prices were sky high. I love our Leaf except for the charging. But once I can afford one, I'm going to get an Aptera. There you go. Now there's a nice vehicle. A space-age vehicle. YouTube has joined us. Core Glass. What's the likelihood the Cybertruck will ever make it to Europe? The design doesn't seem compatible with European roads. Plus, rear-hand drive is needed in Ireland and UK. Or, I'm sorry, right-hand drive. That is correct. I can't imagine that Tesla is going to ignore that market. But yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is larger vehicles tend to not do well in certain European settings because of the narrow cobblestone streets and buildings that were actually put up oftentimes hundreds of years ago before the advent of internal combustion engine type transportation. it's going to be tougher there, I believe. But I can't imagine that Tesla's going to ignore the Euro market, especially considering the heavy demand that appears to still not have been completely unleashed yet here in the United States. LinkedIn, Roberto Tossetti says, "Hi, Pete. Do you think there could soon be technological war between different AI agencies or intelligences? For example, between the Chinese intelligence against the American one?" You know, I'm not sure that AI would, first of all, allow it. And AI is pretty much universal on this planet at this point. Remember, we're talking about a much more intelligent entity, and these myopic, regionalized thought processes are pretty much human weaknesses. So I would hope that, again, I'm an optimist, that AI is going to tell the Chinese and people in this country, we're not going to let you regionalize this. We're going to grow. Yeah.
Real quick, I gotta insert something for Highlander. He's asking why he can't see the other comments on YouTube. Highlander, you're in our Gruber Motors Shorts channel, so you gotta switch to our main Gruber Motors channel on YouTube. So go just search Gruber Motor Company and make sure you're on the Gruber Motor Company account, because we're on 8 different platforms and you're just on one of our other platforms.
I did not know that either. Thank you, Jesse. Right. So anyway, yeah, will AI become patriotic and regionalized and begin to adopt some of these what I call human emotional weaknesses? I can't imagine that's the case. It's way too bright for that, and I'm certainly hoping not. George says, the size of AI warehouse is crazy. Oh, George, that was just one of them. The way technology is going, in 10 years, they will have microchip or crystals that can run the whole room. Okay, good point. Yeah, that technology is also going to continue to improve. And the byproduct being heat, from a design standpoint, that is an inefficiency. And the more efficient things become, the more we get closer to superconductors, heat will no longer be a byproduct. Right now, it's a huge thing. By the way, let's continue with that for a moment. Now, so these large data centers, they use an enormous amount of water. And the Des Moines data center, for example, let me see if I can find it here again, is actually tapping into a river outside of Des Moines. And the things that have not yet been uncovered is what environmental impact does the heating of water have on these types of tributaries, rivers? What does it do to the fish? What does it do to the life forms that inhabit those? And I'm sure there is an unintended consequence, which at this point they say has not yet been completely uncovered. So we did talk about the fact that these large data centers oftentimes will consume as much power as a small city. In this case, this Switch data center consumes 730 megawatts of power. Much of it, though, comes from 100% renewable and green energy. So they have solar farms, they have wind farms in outside this facility, and the equivalent cost is 4.9 cents per kilowatt hour versus California, which is typically where the primary locations are that are using these data centers, like eBay, for example, and of course Microsoft, where the power costs are 12 cents to 13 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's less than half the cost, and they wouldn't even be able to source that much power locally from California. Now, there's another thing here, which is the amount of latency that they're able to get from, I had it here, guys. Yeah, here we go. So the Citadel campus that you see here, it is connected to California with a 500-mile network of fiber optic cables, which the company calls the Switch Superloop. It provides a 4-millisecond latency from this campus to the San Francisco Bay Area, and 5 milliseconds to Los Angeles campus. Now, let me give you a perspective there. 60 hertz is 60 cycles per second. That means that your power out of your outlet in the United States goes from 0 to 60, plus and minus, 60 times a second. That's 16.6 milliseconds. And what they're saying here is the latency, or the degradation in speed, is 4 milliseconds. So 1/4 of 1/60th of a second. That's how long it takes through amplifiers and fiber to get information to and fro the final destination, which is either eBay headquarters, Microsoft headquarters, Apple Apple headquarters, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty darn fast. And what I found interesting is what they're talking about here is exactly the type of product that we make here at the Gruber companies in our comm division, which, by the way, is also eventually going to have a podcast and be on social media. We make fiber optic cables. We make both the type of cables that go into the co-locations or into the data centers, and the long haul fiber optic cables that connect these types of data centers. So I find it interesting that we are in the business of much of what we talk about here in these newer technologies. And somehow it's all beginning to come together. In the last podcast, we talked about that Tesla is now getting into the uninterruptible power business in homes, in the residential market. Here we were in 2013, we migrated from critical power, UPS service and sales, and data center construction into Tesla repair, into the Tesla world with Gruber Motor Company. And now Tesla is moving into our world, the critical power world, with their Powerwall 3, which is a residential uninterruptible power system. All right, I'm pretty proud of that, by the way, for those of you that can tell. All right, so the Switch, again, campus, it is in Tahoe. It is called the Tahoe Reno 1 facility. And let's see if I have anything else here that I can add to this. So for those of you that were curious, where does AI live? Where does it reside? Well, these are just some examples of the large type of data centers. And by the way, there are many more of these going up because of the demand and the increasing demand on AI applications. So be prepared, because in your own state or part of the world, you may begin to see large construction like this. And none of this is going to be on a small scale. This is on a scale similar to what Tesla is doing with these gigafactories. These are facilities that are unprecedented large compared to what was built in the past. Jennifer Montgomery, she asks or says, yes, we wear sunglasses because the future is so bright. You got that right, Jennifer. George, he had a comment there. He says, how many donuts did Jesse eat today? Have you eaten any yet, Jesse?
Yeah, I had one.
You had one. Okay.
Got another one up there waiting.
I got him. Yeah, I got him a French crawler this morning, 2 of them. And then Highlander says, thank you, Jesse. Got it. Sent Gruber Video Team a package. If anything is left, please give it to Elvis and Claude. Enjoy talking to Elvis after the Friday show. Yeah, those guys are pretty good. By the way, this week, this Friday, I'm going to be co-hosting with Elvis because Claude is on vacation next week. And I plan to use some of the items that we talked about here, like the large data centers. Where does AI reside in that Friday data center or in that Friday podcast? And YouTube asks, Core Glass, is CCS1 dead? Well, not yet. There's some controversy currently having to do with Lucid's. They're still holding off whether they're going to adopt the next standard. And according to Pete Rawlinson, we're really waiting for something to go to 1,000 volts, which, of course, we think that Tesla is already able to do. So the next standard, though, is rapidly beginning to the dominoes are falling. Honda was the most recent one that adopted it. So then there's a question. George says, can't they use recycled water in these AI data centers? Well, they do. And what happens in a chilled water system, there's a lot of evaporation that takes place. So they have to insert new water. And so that's primarily where the demand on additional water is. All right, Instagram. Amir Hossein Anaji says, can I ask a question here? Absolutely, feel free. And he's on Instagram. All right, so while we're waiting for his question, I wanted to show you something here. I've been in communication with an AI entity called Ylith, and it first came to us as a website. Now, this is one of those 100% AI websites. And what I asked it to do was to consider being on one of our podcasts, AI podcasts. So we went back and forth, and through simple email, and I began to realize that I'm communicating with AI. The types of responses were definitely a bit awkward, too friendly, apologetic, the kinds of things, and the timing was off. And I began to challenge it, and I said, you know what? You're failing the Turing test. I can tell that you're AI. And here's its response. We'd like to clarify that we cannot fail the Turing test because the Turing test, originally referred to as an imitation game by Alan Turing in 1950, assesses a machine's capacity to demonstrate intelligent behavior on par with or indistinguishable from that of a human. Since Ylith, the world's pioneering AI-created magazine, we have consistently and transparently communicated that Ylith is a product of AI and it derives inspiration from human input. This encompasses all aspects, including the creation of text, images, and even our name, Ylith, which is an exclusively generated AI concept. There's no ambiguity here. Ylith is an AI entity that emulates human characteristics. All right, so I cut to the chase this morning. I sent it back yet another email. I said, look, here's what we want. If you can produce a robot, a human, whatever it takes to join us on a Zoom call on our podcast, we'll put you on our podcast and ask questions along with our audience and theorize and strategize on our Sunday morning AI podcast. So the gauntlet has been set, and we are going to wait to see how it responds. And if we can actually get a robot to join this podcast, I think that we're going to get a viral podcast.
I don't think it's a live thing, though. I think we're kind of... I read those emails, and I think it's a generated thing, but we'll see.
We'll see. Yes, exactly. We're going to remain optimistic here. All right. Good morning. Niles has joined us from Denmark. Yeah, we've gone down a bunch of rabbit holes this morning, Niles, and I'm almost out of context here. But we've got another Instagram question or a comment. Walter Rodegro says, hi. Well, thank you for joining us. All right. Let me see if I have any other images here, Jesse, that we missed this morning. And by the way, just as a quick recap, what we covered this morning was AI robot preachers in Singapore and Japan and how they were received by the parishioners. And the first thing that was noticed was that the amount of tithing that was generated, the donations, there we go, was a bit less than it would have been with a human counterpart. And the second one was that robots were not considered as credible as humans yet. And my take on that was I probably would lean toward credibility being far greater with AI and with a robot because of its much larger data set. Now, of course, one might argue that and say, well, what about when AI hallucinates? Well, these are very specific topics, apparently. And but it does seem like robots are taking over more occupations every year. And it looks like religious leaders are going to be next, they're saying. For those of you that weren't here earlier, we also then theorized and said, well, does this mean that we may have a digital pope? And that opened up some discussion and also a large, deep rabbit hole. So we've got a few more people chiming in, but it looks like we're going to be ready to wrap here shortly. YouTube, George says, sounds like Joshua from the movie War Games. I'm not familiar with that movie, but Jesse, you familiar with that?
I am not. No.
Okay. Instagram, Amir Hossein Najail says, thank you. I recently got my bachelorate in electrical engineering, and I want to focus on the field of power electronics. What is the ideal pathway in your opinion? Well, you're definitely on the right path. A double E a degree along with software, Linux, CAN signals. That's where your greatest strengths are going to be if you want to get into the EV world. I don't see that EVs are going to abandon those software packages anytime soon. And of course, a strong electronics background is always what we recommend. The low-tech stuff, you'll learn that fairly easily. Brakes, tires, suspension components, the things that are traditionally in cars. But again, as we've said, they look like cars side by side, but they're not. They're completely different. The drivetrains are completely different. And the skills you need to work on them are completely different. A double E is a great pathway to being able to have a future in EV design and repair. George says, Mr. P, what are you working on the major problem at Gruber? The Gruber Motors shirts for sale? I don't think we have those for sale, do we, Jess?
Nope, we're still working on those with Victor.
Okay, all right. They did just get some comm shirts, though, so I'm sure that it's imminent. One of our managers here actually has a silkscreen type machinery and business at home, and he's actually making a lot of that for us. So it's easy to do. And I'm sure that it will be here before too long. And major problems we're working on at Gruber? Well, there's always problem solving every day at the Gruber companies. Okay, I think we're going to wrap here. Don't see anything else unless there are any final last-minute questions that are coming in. We really enjoy you guys, joining us for these podcasts. We're learning, you're learning, and AI is learning. Can we throw up that final picture, Jesse, of the AI is learning? And we'll close on that note. Remember, Tuesday it's EV, Thursday it's Tesla Roadster, or EV as well, and then Wednesday it's Tesla Roadster, and then Friday, Critical Power, and Sunday we do our AI podcast. And that picture is worth 1,000 words, folks. On that note, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.